Every day, you and I get bombarded with negative news. And just like our bodies becomes what we eat, our minds become the information that we consume. If you want to stay positive, it's so important that you also listen to stories that inspires you and uplifts you. In this podcast, we interview world-leading experts dedicated to solving the world's most pressing problems. And if you stick around, I promise you will not only be as informed as if you watch the news, you will feel uplifted, inspired, and have more positive energy in your life. Welcome to Great.com Talks with. Hi and welcome. Today Great.com talks with Shelley Full-Nasso, who is the CEO of NCCS, which stands for the National Coalition for Cancer Survivorship. And if you haven't heard of them before, they are on a mission to advocate for quality cancer care for all people touched by cancer. And if you're new here into this podcast, you definitely want to press subscribe, either on YouTube or in your podcast app, because today we're going to look at what is the quality of life for people touched by cancer and what can we do to improve it. So Shelley, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
So how would you describe the NCCS to someone that is not familiar with your organization?
So NCCS has been around for 35 years. We were founded, this year is our 35th anniversary, when a group of people who were considered cancer victims at the time, cancer treatments were getting better and people were living longer, but they were living with a lot of collateral damage from the treatment. And they came together, they didn't want to be considered victims anymore. They really coined the kind of lexicon, or changed the lexicon in the United States from cancer victim to cancer survivor, and really set out to build a movement to focus on how people live with cancer during and after their cancer treatment, and how we can, because a lot of times the focus is on treating the cancer, beating the cancer, and that's incredibly important. And the research and the treatments are all to help people survive. But now that people are surviving longer, and we have more than, in the United States, more than 17 million cancer survivors. We need to make sure we're dealing with how they live, how well they live during their treatment and after their treatment, because the cancer treatments can be debilitating. They can live with long-term effects of their cancer treatment, physically, mentally, emotionally, and functionally, and financially. So we work to try to educate patients, educate providers, and affect public policy in the United States around how we deliver cancer care in this country and how we take care of cancer survivors.
Beautiful. I can understand in a sense that people saw them as cancer victims when not many people survived, but so important to change just that phrase to survivors instead of victims. It makes a huge difference in how empowered, I imagine, the survivors feel. So,
and one thing I'll just say about that is our founders really decided that they would consider someone a survivor from the day of diagnosis. So a lot of times people think, well, I'm not a survivor yet because I'm still in treatment, or I haven't finished, or people with advanced disease who will live, can sometimes live 10, 15, 20 years with advanced cancer. They may never be cured or in remission. And so they may feel like, well, I'm not a survivor because I'm not done. But we consider everyone a survivor. If you've had a diagnosis of cancer, we encourage people to really, whatever word identifies with you is fine. So some people feel like thriver, or person living with cancer, or there are a lot of different words people feel like that resonate with them to describe their experience, and we embrace that. But when we talk about people with cancer as survivors, we talk about anyone from diagnosis. You're a survivor in our eyes, and when we advocate, we're advocating for everyone.
I very much enjoy that. So they can choose their own words instead of being put into a box of victimhood.
Right.
So help me paint a picture then for what kind of problems are the survivors going through. You mentioned physical, mental, emotional, financial, but what does that look like? And what would you like people to understand that hasn't been down this path?
Right. So one of the things we do is a survey. Every year we did our 2020 State of Cancer Survivorship survey, and we're working on our 2021 survey now. And some of the top concerns we heard from cancer survivors across the country that are things like fatigue, and cognitive issues and anxiety, depression. So what happens is if you finish cancer treatment, you've been going through this intense experience. You're seeing your medical oncologist for chemotherapy infusions, or your radiation oncologist for radiation, or both. And then you're told you're done. Sometimes they ring a bell. You go off to live your life. And you have had this sort of support around you of seeing your oncology nurse, your oncologist, and even sometimes you're sitting in the infusion chair with other cancer survivors or other cancer patients being treated. And then you're done and you're told, go live your life. And while that's wonderful, you're happy to have survived. There's no going back to pre-cancer life. Everything's changed for you. So now aches and pains and feelings in your body, you wonder, is that my cancer returning? You may have debt from the financial debt from your treatments, because treatment can be very expensive and insurance coverage doesn't always cover everything. Even people with good insurance can end up with financial issues. You have sometimes that anxiety and depression, that worrying about it coming back, but also, sometimes there's survivor's guilt. Why did I survive when other people didn't? Also, sometimes people feel like we hear from survivors that even their friends and family are like, well, what's the deal? You've survived, you're done. Aren't you happy? Why aren't you happy? Why don't you just get past this? But there's a lot of mental and emotional toll that this treatment has taken on you. And then there's a lot of physical issues. So some treatments can leave you with neuropathy, where you don't have the full feeling in your extremities. The fatigue is very real. Cancer patients talk about chemo brain, and there's been a lot of discussion about that. Some clinicians dismiss it, others really try to understand it better. There's even been some studies showing that it's not just chemo treatment, but even radiation treatment can leave you with, your brain feeling fuzzy or not feeling like you can remember everything. There are functional issues. Sometimes some cancer treatments can leave you with lymphedema and swelling. So there's a lot of, and then depending on the type of treatment and the type of cancer, there are different functional issues you may have. If you had radiation, I know that a family member of mine had radiation in his head and neck area because that's where his cancer was. And it left him very debilitated. He couldn't eat. He couldn't talk as well. And so there's these long-term effects of the treatment for the cancer that are still with you, in addition to the physical, the emotional, and sometimes financial. And cancer survivors have described it as a roller coaster of emotions because of the concerns about, is this cancer returning, and trying to find someone to help them deal with some of these physical effects. People say that sometimes that the first year after cancer treatment was harder than the treatment itself, because they're trying to find that new normal. Some people hate the term new normal, some people embrace it, but the fact is, you don't go back to life as it was before cancer. You have to figure out what that is for you now.
Wow. I can imagine how intense the trauma must be to your immune system, your nervous system, maybe your whole social system. And it's so much more than just removing the tumor. But that is not what the first thing I would think of as someone that hasn't experienced cancer.
Right.
So thank you for painting that picture for me. Now, your website name is Cancer Advocacy. So knowing all of the problems you just painted, what are you advocating for? What would you like to change in the system?
So we advocate for a lot of different things. So we really look at kind of all of the ways that public policy in the United States impacts how cancer care is delivered in the United States, whether it's research, whether it's how treatments are approved through our Food and Drug Administration, and then how we pay for cancer care affects how cancer care is delivered. So some of our policy efforts are focused on making sure that we're paying for the right things to make sure that the physicians are incentivized to do the things that mean a lot to patients, right? So we want to see cancer patients have a care plan that really outlines what their treatment, what their diagnosis is, what their prognosis is, what the treatments that have been selected are, what are the things that they need to be looking for while they're going through treatment? When do they need to call their physician? And then also a treatment plan we call it a survivorship care plan that helps address that transition to post-treatment survivorship. So a survivorship care plan includes a summary of what treatments you had, what are the things you need to do for ongoing surveillance to make sure that you're getting whatever screening and tests that are appropriate based on the type of cancer you had and your treatments. What are the things you need to do for your own health? One of the things we heard in our survey from cancer patients is that they want more information about about maintaining a healthy weight and diet and exercise, because those do have an effect on recurrence of cancer. And so they want to understand better how they can lower their risk. And while that sounds like obviously everybody should have that, right? But it doesn't happen. People don't get that plan that really succinctly explains what they've been through, what they need to be looking for going forward. And then they can use that to take it to their primary care physician, who could help them, address things going forward, so that so it's not just the oncologist that understands what they've been through, but their other doctors as well. It's something that has been recommended for a number of years, but it's just not happening as often as we would like to see it. And when we asked our survey respondents, it was less than 20% of patients had received a survivorship care plan. So it seems like when we talk to people about it, they say, well, yeah, of course, why wouldn't you get that? It doesn't happen because, again, part of it is just the medical system is overloaded. They've got a lot of patients. They don't have a lot of time with patients. They have, and their focus is on treating the cancer. And what we hear from cancer patients is that they want to be seen as the whole person with cancer, not just the cancer, and have this plan that would help them address the other aspects of their care or aspects of their life that were affected by cancer.
So I'm hearing a much more holistic view of the treatment and the person that is going through the treatment. So yeah, you were going to say something.
Well, so part of what we're doing is we have a program called Survivorship Champions, where we're trying to share with clinicians who are interested in improving survivorship care what that means to patients, what patients want from that care. So whether it be, primary care physicians or oncologists, but understanding more of the patient perspective on what they want from their care and sharing resources with them on how to improve how they're helping patients address these issues. So that's one of the things that we do to try to help them. So we kind of address things on educating patients, empowering advocates to help advocate for other cancer patients and themselves, and then educating providers, and then also affecting public policy. We kind of try to look at it at all of those different, come at it from all of those different angles to try to really make change happen.
Got it. Yeah, that's so important. Now, I also see that you work with access to care and equity in care. So how are you working with that?
So we've spent a lot of time over the last number of years working on advocating for access to cancer patients to have insurance through the Affordable Care Act, which was passed or some call it Obamacare, which was passed in 2010 in the United States, but in 2017 there was a big effort to repeal it or get rid of it, and that really expanded access to health insurance for so many people with cancer, and there was a threat that they would lose that access. And now with the Biden administration, there's actually the chance that, and even in the legislation that recently passed in the United States, that can expand that. So part of it is just making sure that people have access to insurance that's not tied to their employment, because sometimes if you think about in the United States, so much of our insurance is tied to employment. And if you're a cancer survivor who has to stop working because of your cancer treatment, then you also may lose that health insurance. And before the Obamacare, there was not this easy way for people to get insurance. So cancer survivors could not get insurance. They had a pre-existing condition. There was no marketplace for them to buy it at an affordable price. The Affordable Care Act provided that marketplace and also provided Medicaid for people who had lower incomes and expanded who could get Medicaid, which was government insurance. So it made a huge difference for cancer survivors to not be locked into employment-related insurance, and then having that insurance allowed them to get coverage for their cancer care, but also all of the care for their post-treatment needs. And so that's something that we have continued to focus on as it was sort of under threat in the last 4 years. And now that there's a chance to expand that for cancer patients going forward, because, there's a lot of issues related to access, but for us, one of the most important is access to health insurance, because if you don't have health insurance, then your access is much harder. And then there's still other access issues that we work on, but access to affordable health insurance is really the key. I know it's probably really different for your listeners in other countries that don't have this kind of system, and it's, it is unfortunate, but it is a huge reality for cancer patients and anybody with a serious medical condition in the United States.
Yeah. As a citizen of Sweden, I want to remind myself to be grateful and not take the universal healthcare we have for granted. If I were to be put in this situation, I can imagine how hard it must be to lose your insurance because you can't work, and it's just being stuck in this really hard situation. So thank you for progressing these acts forward. So what do you hope to accomplish in the next 5-10 years? Do you have any exciting projects or anything specific you're working on?
We do have a few projects that we're working, a lot of things that we're working on. We're always working on a lot of things, but we are constantly trying to educate cancer survivors who want to be advocates for others. So we think of advocacy as part of it is learning how to advocate for yourself, because you do have to advocate for yourself in terms of what are the right treatments for you, because there are a lot of decisions that are made about your cancer treatment that may that you need to be part of making those decisions. And we advocate for shared decision making and trying to help empower patients to be part of the decision making about their care. So that's kind of the first level of advocacy. But we've also found that not everybody wants to do that or is able to do that. And sometimes, when you're facing a diagnosis like cancer, sometimes you just want to say, just tell me what to do. And that's okay. But we need to make sure that the system works for people who aren't as able to advocate for themselves. So part of what we do is working on that systems level, but then also on the individual level of helping people become an advocate for themselves, and then empowering people to become advocates for others. So we have this a program we call CPAT, Cancer Policy and Advocacy Team, where we have advocates from around the country, all different types of cancer, all different stages of cancer, who advocate in their local communities. They come to Washington, D.C. and meet with their members of Congress to talk about different policies that are important. They do media interviews. They share their experience and how that can help others. Both sometimes it's helping people one-on-one, and sometimes it's representing the patient perspective as decisions are made about research, about how care is delivered, about quality measurement, all kinds of different ways that patients need to be at the table. So we're recruiting and training patients to become really strong advocates and represent the patient voice in these discussions. And then I mentioned our program called Survivorship Champions, where we're really trying to help. What we want to get is any providers or clinicians who are interested in improving survivorship care to work with us, to let us be a resource to them on what survivors need and how they can improve that. Because, as we've made a lot of strides in improving survivorship care, but it still feels often like an afterthought compared with the treatment. And obviously you need the treatment to survive the cancer, but we also need to remember how you live with it. And we just are, trying to get to as many providers as we can to share what patients want from that experience. So those are some of the things that we're working on and will continue to work on over the next 5 to 10 years.
Be grateful for the work that you're doing. It's so important. So imagine someone listening to this then, and they want to do something on an individual level to help people that are either going through cancer treatment or that has been going through, and they're learning to live with cancer. What can they do to help out?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think it is sometimes really hard when you've got somebody in your life that's going through cancer to know how to support them and how to help them on an individual level. Sometimes people get scared and they don't know what to do to support people. So a lot of times they back away. We hear from people a lot of times that there are people in their lives who just can't handle it. So I think, on an individual level, you just try to be supportive of the person who's going through cancer, try to educate yourself on what some of the issues that they may be facing are. We have resources on our website that talk about for caregivers, but also, just to help you understand we have a thing called the Cancer Survival Toolbox that talks about some of the tools that you can use as a patient or as a caregiver to help that self-advocacy. But then if you want to think, beyond just helping an individual in your life and you want to advocate on behalf of others, you can join I mentioned our cancer policy and advocacy team. It's free to join on our website, and then you get information and access to different trainings from us. We have a newsletter where we try to match people with different opportunities for advocacy. And then we have our conference, our symposium in June every year, where we bring people together to learn about advocacy skills, about policy issues. And then we have our Hill Day where we go meet with members of Congress. It's virtual in 2021, but we are looking forward to 2022 being able to be back in person together in Washington, D.C.
Beautiful. Shelley, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. I very much appreciate you coming on and educating us about not only what it's like to go through cancer, but also what it's like to live with it. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I'm really honored.
Thank you. And for you listening, if you enjoyed this conversation, press subscribe on YouTube or in your podcast app, because then the algorithms know that this is an important conversation, so more people can learn about what we can all do to help raise the life quality of those who are surviving cancer. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode. What is great.com? That is the most common question that we get. And the shortest answer I can give you is that we are a company that is moving money from the online casino industry and donates it to charities that is helping the environment. The long answer, unfortunately, I don't have time to tell you today. But if you're curious, definitely Google what is great.com to learn more.